Welcome to Managing Commercial Human Spaceflight Liability, which is an advanced space law course. My name is Juji Carminati, and I have a doctorate in space law as well as an LLM in space, cyber, and telecommunications law, and I look forward to sharing this next hour with you. The question we're going to answer today, or at least attempt to answer, is who decides whether and to what extent spaceflight participants can recover from commercial human spaceflight companies for injury or death? And the way we're going to do that today is through a little hypothetical. Once upon a time, Jane Plain was very excited. She just found out she was going to fly on a suborbital flight by Gets Around Suborbital Flights. The airplane trip to the launch site the day before the suborbital flight had been really long, about 14 hours. But Jane had taken a sedative and just slept for the entire plane ride, so she felt pretty rested. The flight had been offered by Gets Around's sister company, Fast Flying, and all the other spaceflight participants had flown together from the last day of training to the launch site. Finally, at 10 a.m. on the day of, she took off alongside the other participants. It was amazing. Jane felt mostly fine during the entire trip and seemed elated when she was done. That evening, Jane participated in a small reception for SFPs, spaceflight participants, and their families. Food was catered by one of Gets Around's service companies. Although Jane had communicated all her allergies, at one point she thought she tasted something she wasn't supposed to eat in her dish. No matter, she thought, let's not ruin the moment. At night, Jane went to the home she and her family had rented for the weekend. She went to bed by her husband's side. She didn't tell anyone, but during the evening, Jane had begun developing a chest pain and difficulty breathing. Maybe it's just the excitement from today, she thought, before she took another sleep aid and went to bed. The next morning, she was dead. Can Jane's family recover from Gets Around? Well, first, let's talk a little bit about the fact that there are three things we're going to be looking at today, right? We're going to be looking at what is fault, what is responsibility, and what is liability. Those are three very different concepts. Fault is a layman's term of referring to something that makes another thing happen. But sometimes you may feel at fault for something, but really the relationship between cause and effect is pretty attenuated. So while you may feel at fault, you're not legally responsible. The question then comes to what is responsibility? Well, responsibility is something you were supposed to take care of and you didn't take care of, right? And then there's liability. Liability is a legally created concept of who is going to be held responsible, who is going to be found at fault. And it's not the same thing. And as an attorney, you probably already know those are very different concepts. So let's say that Jane's attorney or Jane's family attorney writes a letter to Gets Around Suborbital Flights. What are they going to answer? Well, they're going to come up with one of four answers, and we know them as lawyers. We learned these in law school. The first answer is going to be, well, stuff happens, right? And that's a factual scenario. That's a factual response. Look, okay, bad things happened, and that's just the way it is. But it's not our responsibility. There's no legal connection to our conduct. The next one is, we didn't make any mistakes. And that's more of a factual inquiry, right? What did they do? What did they not do? Did Gets Around commit errors that it could be held responsible for that led to Jane's death? The next response is, you can't prove negligence. Now, that is a legal fiction, right? Because it's not saying they didn't do anything wrong. It's not that they didn't do anything that caused Jane's death. It's that they didn't do anything that meets the four elements of negligence such that you can prove negligence. Number 4, Gets Around could argue, hey, Jane signed a waiver. She signed a contractual release, and pursuant to the terms of the release, your family cannot sue us for what happened to her. And then there's implied assumption of the risk, which is yet another legal fiction, right? But implied assumption of the risk is a common law doctrine by which an individual engaged in an activity and impliedly assumed the risks thereof. And I am oversimplifying that doctrine, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. It gets very complicated.